All right, Erev Tov. Welcome to those who are here in person with us, as well as those of you who are on camera. This is our second of our three-part shiurim on Teshuvah, specifically on characters from the Tanakh and lessons that we could learn. So if we started with David last week, I want to start with a different character. But before we start, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story about Icarus, Daedalus, and the origin of the name of the concept hubris. Now, if you don't know these names, you're in good company. I didn't either know them until about a few days ago. So here's the story. It's a Greek mythological story. You do with it what you want. True, not true, it doesn't really matter. As legend goes, there was a king in Athens who wanted one of his very, very intelligent people called Daedalus to build him this beautiful maze. A maze that it would be intricate, gardens, forests, rivers, so no enemies could come in. He hired him, and this Daedalus was brilliant. He made a labyrinth of really something incredible. At the end, the payment the king gave him was imprisonment. He said, now that you know all my secrets, you know all the ways how to get in, get out, I can't trust you. I'm going to keep you here as a prisoner. And as a gift, I'm going to let you bring your son. His name is Icarus. So now the father and the son are sitting there and they're wallowing away day by day. And they're very sad because they're going to die eventually. But the father doesn't give up hope. And he keeps looking up to the sky. He looks down. What could he use here to get out? And every day as he passes, he sees that there are birds who keep shedding their feathers. See, he comes up with an idea. He starts collecting all the feathers. He glues them together with wax, with some of the stuff from the trees, some of the bark, some of the mud. And he turns to his son and he says, you see those beautiful birds? We're going to be like them one day. I'm going to make us a set of wings, and together we're going to fly. We're going to fly so high that we're going to be able to fly right over the maze back into freedom. This happens day after day. Finally, a couple of years later, they both have a set of wings. The father looks at Icarus and he says, one thing, son, we're going to now launch ourselves. And I want you to be very, very careful. If you look down below, there's an ocean. If you get close to that, you're going to die. I want you to look up though. There's a sun. If you get too close to that, what's going to happen to you? You're going to burn to death. So they take this big leaf, something like a branch of sorts, and they use it like a slingshot. And they're flying. And they're flying and they're so excited. They could finally see they're going up and up and up and up. They could see they're above. They see the city again. They could taste and smell freedom. And here's where the problem starts. Icarus, he's feeling great. He's a bird. He's free. His wings are flapping. He sees the beautiful sun. He says, why don't I go just a little bit higher? He starts climbing a little bit higher. And it's gorgeous. There's wind. He feels like the king of the world. And he's going higher and higher. And he fails to look at his father, who's desperately waving to him, don't go. As he goes higher, he gets closer to the sun. The closer he gets to the sun, the wax that was holding all the feathers together starts melting. As the wax melts, one by one, the feathers keep falling off. And he does a nosedive. And he meets his death at the bottom of the ocean. That is the end of the story of Icarus. It's a very sad story, actually. This is where the origin of the word hubris comes from. Have you ever heard that word before? Okay. Hubris is a term used where there are people who may start off good, and they start climbing. And they climb higher and higher and higher. And at a certain point, they climb so high onto their own ego that that's precisely the moment they commit their own suicide. You find this with politicians. You find this with leaders. You find this with everybody and anybody who starts off with fantastic ambition, left unchecked, eventually gets burned by the sun. I want to talk to you today about a character who I think sometimes is really misrepresented. Why do I say misrepresented? Because we always like to think black and white terms. This person's good, that one's bad. This is evil, this is right. You start opening the Tanakh, and every single class I'm going to make a pitch for the Tanakh. I'm sitting here in the shadow of Dalia, who I know every time I start a pasuk, she finishes it for me. Every time I want something, I just turn around to Dalia, not just to say shh, but say, hey, what do we... The truth is, the Tanakh is where you bump into humanity. And humanity is always going to be much more complicated than the black and white we like to paint. I want to talk to you about a character whose name is Yarovam ben Nevat. Now, for those of you not familiar, so unlike Icarus, I actually grew up knowing how to say Yarovam's name, except this is the way I used to pronounce it. Yarovam. And if you speak Hebrew, Yeravam. But then we've had a long-standing argument, my husband and I, about what the correct pronunciation is. And today we had that debate settled because we called Rabbi Yosef Zarnigian, who's really a master of many things, but Dikduk being one of them. And he explained to me, because of the kamatz katan, the word then becomes Yarovam. So you're going to forgive me if I slip up, but at the very least, I put a disclaimer in the beginning that the correct pronunciation is going to be Yarovam, which is probably why, if you look at the English, they pronounce his name as Jeroboam or Jarobam, because phonetically, they understood that really it was Yarovam. Who is Yarovam ben Nevat? How does he start off? Where does he veer off the proper path? And ultimately, how does it lead him to be the paradigm or the symbol of those people who are Chachamim say, you want to know those who do so much evil and lead everybody else astray? This name will always come up. I mean, how does he go from being the savior of the Jewish people, the one who's standing up for the good of humanity, all the way to the other side of the spectrum? I want to take you on that journey, and I think there are very important lessons for us to pull out. So if I can ask, bring your Tanakh out. We're going to be looking at Milachim, okay, so Kings. We're going to do a couple of chapters. So we're starting with Milachim 1, Kings 1, chapter Yud Aleph, Pasuk Chavav.
So chapter 11, verse 21.
Thank you. It's Milachim Aleph, Kings 1, chapter 11. Chavav, here we go. So I want to give you a backstory, which is, we're now talking about the time period where Shlomo HaMelech is reaching his old age. And if you look a couple of psukim back, if you look just a little bit back at the beginning of this chapter, you find that Shlomo HaMelech is harshly critiqued by God for having too many wives, for having too much of what kings shouldn't be having, and ultimately his wives are the ones who lead him astray. And he is told that because of his actions, you see, the unbelievable thing about Judaism is nobody's above the law, even the king. Shlomo HaMelech is told, because of your actions, unfortunately, you will find that the kingship will be taken from your family, not during your lifetime, but right afterwards. This is where we have Yarovam step into the scene. So if you look at Pasuk Chavav, Yarovam, this is going to be a tricky one for me today. Yarovam ben Nevat Efrati, min Hatzereida, v'shem imo Tzurua, isha almana eved l'Shlomo, vayarem yad b'melech. So here we know a couple of things about him. Number one, he's from the city or the county of Ephraim, and his mother is a widow, which makes him an orphan, right? Which makes him an orphan. Very important point. What happens? This is when he decides to rebel against Shlomo. V'zeh hadavar asher herim yad b'melech Shlomo. What happens? Bana et hamil'o, sagar et haperetz ir David aviv. So Shlomo HaMelech, we know, unfortunately, David wanted to build the Bet HaMikdash. Hashem said, you can't. Your hands are full of blood. Even though this is blood that was proper, you fought wars for the Jewish people, conquered the land. You can't build a house of peace when you are a warrior. Your son, Shlomo, will build it. Shlomo finishes building the Bet HaMikdash, and yet he's still collecting taxes as if he's building. And the general feeling amongst the population is, hold on, it's not fair. You ever have this where they ask you, I knew somewhere 20 years they were asking for a donation for a mikveh. I could tell you the well has been dry for the last 20 years. And at a certain point, you feel like, I don't mind donating, but where's the money going to? So here you have Shlomo HaMelech does something interesting. He encloses the city of Yerushalayim, which really gets in the way of the people coming up to the Beit HaMikdash. That's one thing. The second thing he does is he has a very beautiful wife, one of the daughters of Paro, right, of Egypt. Now you have to understand, much of his marriages were strategic alliances, like you find in many of the kings, between the English and the French. And many of these relationships are not so much the love and romance as much as really political alliances that we have. He closes it and he builds her a beautiful, along the wall, a bedroom. Now what happens? He sees Yarovam, and he says, this is a very talented individual. Look at Pasuk Chavchet 28. Va'ish Yarovam gibor chayim. He was strong. He was a good leader. Vayar Shlomo atanar ki oseh melacha. Hu vayafked oto lechol sevel bet Yosef. He says, let me put you in charge. Let me put you in charge of the people you come from, right? He comes from Ephraim, from the tribe of Yosef. You're going to be in charge. You're a good hard worker. You speak the language. You're a good liaison. I'm going to put you in charge. Vayi ba'et ahi, and it was then Yarovam yatsa miYerushalayim vayimtza oto. So here, we don't actually get the story of what went wrong. That's where you needed to look into Chazal. What did Yarovam actually do? So Shlomo is busy collecting taxes. Yarovam he's the middleman. You have to understand, what kind of middleman is he? He's an orphan. His mother is a widow. We know generally in society who are from the most vulnerable people. Not just 2,000 years ago. The orphans, the widows. It's why you find so much in the Torah where Hashem says, I will always stand up for the orphan, for the widow, for the poor. These are the people who have the lowest standing in society. They unfortunately are not lowest because of anything they did, simply because they're the most fragile. Yarovam, he looks at the people and he says, Misken, you're suffering. You're suffering for no reason. Shlomo HaMelech is making bad decisions. He's collecting money he shouldn't. He's closing off the gate, making us needing to go roundabouts. It's not fair. It's not fair what Shlomo HaMelech is doing. Almost similar to, who else do you have in the king's palace working for him, but sees that his brothers are doing very poorly? This should ring a bell from another character in Tanakh. Remember it says, Vayigdal hayeled in Shemot. It says the Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayigdal. It says it twice. And if you look at Rashi over there, it says, one was he actually physically got big. The second one was he matured. How do we know he matured? Vayar b'sivlotam. He goes out. He's in the king's palace, right? He works in the king's palace. He goes out and he sees his brother suffering in the field, and he can't tolerate it. Rashi there says, Natan einav v'libo liot meitzar aleihim. He sees them suffering. He says, I can't stand it. I'm from those people. Even though I grew up in royalty, I have a good job, I'm getting paid by the government. Yarovam actually has no reason to stand up for his brothers. He's getting paid. He has a good job. And yet his innate feeling is, I know what it's like to be from the people that nobody wants in society. I know what it's like to be part of the group that nobody cares about. When I used to go to school in Washington Heights, it always reminded me, there's an author, Charles Dickens, who wrote a book, A Tale of Two Cities, about the French Revolution. And he starts off, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. When you walk down the streets of Washington Heights, you can tell who the government cares about and who the government doesn't. So you can walk down two streets. They're right parallel to each other. One of them has beautiful lawns and gates and ushers at the door, and it looks like the most gorgeous neighborhood. You walk one street over, the hydrant, I always went in the summer, so the hydrant was always on spraying water. The four floors all have banged out windows you could tell the street is completely neglected. Now, I'm not telling you about what the people inside or outside do, but you see this all the time where governments, they know whose hand they need to shake, and who they need to invite to the convention. And Yarovam, as a leader, says it's not fair. It's not fair, Shlomo HaMelech, what you're doing. So much so, he wasn't incorrect in his criticism. I want to for a second, if you have, you can open Sefaria. Look at in the Talmud section. If you don't, you can listen. It's okay too.
You want to go to Sefaria.org? Click on Talmud.
Click on Talmud. Open up the Sanhedrin. It's going to be 101a or Kaf Aleph. Kuf Aleph, not Kaf. Kuf Aleph, and then it's going to be... So if you're in Sefaria, it's actually going to be 12. Number 12, Yud Bet. If you're not, I have no way of telling you where it is. But it starts off with Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So it should be somewhere in the middle of the... If you're looking at the whole daf, it should be somewhere in the middle. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says the following. Mipnei ma zacha Yarovam lemalchut. What did Yarovam do to merit? He became the next king. You have Shaul, David, Shlomo, Yarovam. What did he do to merit being the next king? Mipnei shochiach et Shlomo. It's the fact that he stood up and gave the king musar. He got up and told the king, "You're wrong. You're hurting the people. You're milking them excessively for your own personal needs." And because he wasn't afraid to do that, he actually merited to be the next king. So the next question is, umipnei ma ne'enash? So then why did he get punished? If he's such a socialist standing up for the people who are downtrodden and struck, why did he get punished? Mipnei shochicho berabim. It's true that he was allowed to rebuke Shlomo, but the way he did it was entirely incorrect. He came to Shlomo, and the Gemara continues. He said, "Your father and you," and he made a huge public scene out of it. For that,
embarrassed him in public.
oh, nachon. He embarrassed him in public in a way that was absolutely unacceptable. So much so, Shlomo HaMelech wants to kill him. And he would have been justified had he killed him. What he did was treasonous. Not what he said. He was allowed to have said what he did, not in the manner that he did. So what happens? Let's go back to the Nevi'im a minute. So Yarovam is now leaving Yerushalayim. If you look at Pasuk Chavtet 29. Vahi bayetahi v'Yarovam yatsa miYerushalayim. He leaves the city, and he will not return until after Shlomo HaMelech dies. Vayimtzo oto Achia Shiloni HaNavi. And the Navi Achia finds him over there. V'hu mitkaseh b'salma chadasha, and he's wearing a new outfit. It is not clear who is wearing the new outfit. Is it the Navi? Right? Or is it Yarovam who's wearing it? Ushneim levadim basada. So now they're here alone in the field. The Navi comes, he approaches him. Vayitpos achia b'salma chadasha asher alav. He takes his beautiful new outfit. Vayikra'eh hashnemaseh kraim, and he tears into 12 pieces. Vayomer liYarovam, kach lecha 10 kraim. Take 10 of these pieces. Ki ko amar Adonai, because this is what Hashem said. Hineni korea ta mamlacha miyad Shlomo. I am going to rip the kingship out of the hand of Shlomo. V'natati lecha et 10 hashivatim, and I'm going to give you 10. So you're not getting all 12, but you are going to get 10 of them. V'hashevet ha'achad yelo leman avdi David leman Yerushalayim ha'yer asher bacharta bo. He's going to get 1, which is really 2, meaning he's going to get Yehuda and Binyamin. The reason Binyamin is included in Yehuda is simply because they were part of the same Nachala. They lived in the same plotted land. So Achia meets him and he tells him, I want you to know you're going to be the next king. You're going to end up taking the 10 tribes with you, though the other 2 are going to stay with David HaMelech's family. At this point, Yarovam runs to Shishak. Okay, he runs to Egypt. Again, similar to when Moshe Rabbeinu is accused of killing the Egyptian, he actually runs to Midian, right? He makes a pilgrimage. He runs away until he's safe. You find Yarovam now leaves town until Shlomo HaMelech dies. Why does he leave town? He's scared. He doesn't want to die, right? He knows Shlomo HaMelech now has a death warrant on him. He doesn't want to die. So he leaves town. Now, if you look with me, let's jump a minute to yeah, I think we have time. Yep. Look at jump to Perek Yud Bet. So go to the 12th chapter. Let's look at Pasuk Aleph, and it's worth it for us to just read the Psukim together. So if you go just to one line up, Mem Gimel 43, you're going to see Vayishkav Shlomo im avotav, Shlomo HaMelech dies, Vayikaver be'ir David aviv, Vayimloch Rechavam b'not tachtav. Shlomo HaMelech dies, his son Rechavam takes over. You find, and you'll see in generally, the text, Rechavam does not have a backbone. That is his biggest challenge. Look at Perek Yud Bet, the 12th chapter. Vayelech Rechavam Shechem, ki Shechem ba kol Yisrael lamnich oto. He goes to the city of Shechem. You should know there's something very interesting. You'll notice that there are certain cities that keep attracting the same problems. For example, we are now 11 or almost 12 months in Gaza, fighting a war. Gaza has always been a place of contention. Unfortunately, there has always been war and strife from time immemorial. Shechem is something very similar. You find Shechem already, the story of Dinah. That's the first encounter we have with the city of Shechem. You then have Yosef HaTzadik going to the city of Shechem to find his brothers, and that's where certain cities and certain personalities and certain things that happen, you find an interesting recurrence. So he goes to Shechem to be anointed. Now already towards the end of Shlomo HaMelech's life, the people are not happy. The people are not happy with the taxes. They're not happy with how he's treating the people. ויהי כשמוע ירובעם בן נבט, והוא עודנו במצרים אשר ברח מפני המלך שלמה, וישב ירובעם במצרים. Yarovam gets the news in Egypt and he says, the king died. You were afraid to come back to the land of Israel because you would have been persecuted and then killed, but the king is dead. So the people go, vayishluchu, much of the nation goes, and they call him, vayikru lo. They say, come, please. Vayavo Yarovam v'chol kal Yisrael. He comes with all of the Jewish people. Vayidabru el Rechavam lemor. And unlike the fear and the respect that they had for Shlomo, they don't have any of that for his son Rechavam. So they get up and they speak to him saying the following. Avicha hiksha et ulenu. Your father was way too harsh with us. He made our burden unbearable. Vata now, and you, ata hakel me'avodat avicha hakasha, are you going to make things better for us? Because the last couple of years that your father ruled were miserable. It was unbearable. Now, you had this opportunity. Are you going to make things better? Because if yes, we're willing to accept you as the king. Vayomer aleim, and Rechavam says to them, Lechu od shelosha yamim v'shavu elai vayilchu am. He says, let me think about it. Go for 3 days, come back, and I'll let you know. And this is where he makes probably his greatest error as the king. Rechavam. Vayivatz hamelech Rechavam et hazkenim, אשר היו עומדים את פני שלמה אביו, בהיותו חי לאמור, איך אתם נועצים להשיב את העם הזה? So the first thing he does is, he goes to the elders. The kingdom is not necessarily age, but he goes to either the Sanhedrin, or he goes to those who were the advisors of Shlomo, and he says, what should I do with the nation? This is what they presented. What do you think I should do? And they respond to him the following. וידברו אליו לאמור. They say, אם היום תהיה עבד לעם הזה, ועבדתם ועניתם ודיברת עליהם דברים טובים, והיה לכם עבדים כל הימים. You want to be chosen as the leader? Learn to become a public servant of the people. If you will be good to them, if you will be kind to them, if you will show them your willingness to work with them, they're going to be yours forever. One of the best pieces of advice to any leader, any parent, anybody in a position of authority. You want to win people over? Be good to them. Any way they have to listen to you. Any way they're your subjects. You might as well get the goodwill of the people through good words. But Rechavam doesn't like this advice, so he goes to his friends. They have to understand, his friends are called Ne'arim. They're not Ne'arim, they're in their 40s. Rechavam at this age is 40. But they're juvenile in their way of thinking. So look at Pasuk Chet. Abinam, come sit down, please. ויעזוב את עצת הזקנים אשר יעצוהו. He leaves the zkenim and the advice that they gave him. ויבעץ את הילדים אשר גדלו איתו. He goes to his friends, the backyard neighborhood kids, the ones who told you it was a really good idea to throw spitballs and to egg somebody's house, right? Those are the people he goes to get some good advice from. What do they say to him? Pasuk tet. ויאמר עליהם, מה אתם נועצים? What do you advise me? ונשיב דבר הטעם הזה אשר דיברו אליי לאמור. What do you think I should tell the nation who said, make things better for us? Their response couldn't be more different. Look at Pasuk Yud. וידברו אליו הילדים אשר גדלו איתו. And these same, the people from his hood. What do they say? כה תאמר לעם הזה. This is what you should repeat to the nation. אביך הכביד את עולנו. ואתה הקל מעלינו. They asked you, are you going to make things better for us? Answer to them the following. כה תדבר עליהם. קטנה אבי, קטוני אבה ממתני אבי. You see my little finger? It's thicker than my dad's waist. Meaning, you think my dad was strict? He's nothing in comparison to me. You think he was mean? Wait till you see what I look like. That sounds good. His friends are telling him, show them muscle. Show them how strong you are so you can silence the opposition. Sounds like good advice. Rechavam comes back to the nation. Look at Pasuk Yud Bet. Vayavo Yarovam b'chol ha'am. So already Yarovam is taking the position as leader, as unofficial, unappointed leader, but he comes back with the whole nation. El Rechavam bayom hashelishi. They come back on the third day. Kasher diber hamelech leimor shuvo elai bayom hashelishi. Just like he had told them, come back on the third day. They come back. Vayan hamelech et ha'am. And he tells the nation really harsh things. He decides not to listen to the Zakenim. He doesn't listen to the advice of the wise, older people. And he tells them, I'm going to be worse. Look at Pasuk Yud Daled. וידבר עליהם כעצת הילדים. And he tells them exactly like his stupid friends told them. אבי הכביד את עולכם. My father made your burden heavy. ואני אוסיף על עולכם. I'm going to make yours even worse. אבי יסר אתכם בשוטים, ואני יסר אתכם בעקרבים. I'm going to come with like scorpions. I'm going to come hurt you. I'm going to be a tyrant over you. And his assumption is that what's their response going to be? Fear. They're going to be terrified of him and say, no, don't worry. Okay, we're with you. What he doesn't realize is the people, you don't just buy them. You can't crush them. Maybe for Shlomo, the good grace of him ruling for many, many years was what made it forgiving towards the end. But you're a new leader. The people are not with you. We say today, he didn't know how to read the room. He didn't know how to look at the audience and say, you know what? Strength is not going to work. There is a time and place to be strong, to crush the opposition. This wasn't it. You have nobody on your team, Rechavam. What do the Jewish people do? Look at Pasuk Tedvav. V'lo shama hamelech el ha'am. He didn't listen to them. Ki hayta siba mi'im Adonai leman hekim et devaro. Because really, ultimately, Hashem had already told Shlomo the kingship will split. What happens? Vayar kol Yisrael ki lo shama hamelech aleim. The nation sees the king is not receptive to any kind of criticism. וישיבו העם את המלך דבר, לאמור, they say to him, מה לנו חלק בדוד, ולא נחלה בבן ישי. We don't need to have anything to do with you or the house of David. We don't want anything to do with you. We're going back home. We're going back to our tents. We are not pledging allegiance. We are not anointing you. You are not our king. ובני ישראל, י"ז, the 17th pasuk, ובני ישראל היושבים בערי יהודה, וימלוך עליהם רחבעם. So a small sect from Shevet Yehuda and Binyamin, they accept Rechavam as the king. The rest of the Jewish nation turns around, says, we're not in. We are not in. And this is heartbreaking because this is where the Jewish people split. And ultimately that split is never healed until the 10 tribes are taken into the exile and then the 2.5 tribes. Up until today, we've only managed to split ourselves further. This is the beginning of the factionalism, the breaking of the Jewish people, where Am Yisrael was under one leadership, one nation, one rulership, and that will never return God willing, until Mashiach comes. But this is where it starts, where you have a leader who is unable or incapable. I'm making up some English words today. Yeah? Unable and incapable of looking at the crowd and saying, you know what? Just because I had a plan, I now have a different crowd and I need to adjust accordingly. What happens? In all this, if you look at Pasuk Chaf, so now the Jewish people go home. Same perek. So we're still in chapter 12, Pasuk Chaf. 20. Vayhi kishmoa et Yisrael. Oh, running late on time. Vayhi kishmoa et kol Yisrael kishav Yarovam. So now the Jewish people, they don't have a leader. But they hear Yarovam is back in town. Vayishluchu vayikru oto el ha'eda. So they say, you know what, this is perfect. We now have a vacancy. Let's bring Yarovam. Let's vayimlechu oto al kol Yisrael. Lo haya achrei bet David zulatar shevet Yehuda levado. They say, come, we want you to be the king. They coronate Yarovam, and he becomes the king of really the largest population of Jews. Because aside for Yehuda and Binyamin, all 10 tribes become his. Now at this point, something interesting. Rechavam, I'm going to tell it to you. Rechavam comes back to Yerushalayim, and he's consulting with his people. And he says, should we go out to war? I don't understand. What is this? It's a revolution. It's a rebellion. And the Navi comes and tells Rechavam, don't do it. Unfortunately, this is a decree from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The kingship will not become yours. And the only thing that fighting will do is bring tremendous bloodshed. And to the credit of Rechavam, he listens. He says, what should I go out to fight for? If I'm not going to win this battle and reunite the Jewish people, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of just spilling blood for no reason? And both Rechavam and Yarovam do not go to war. And that is something I think we don't always credit them with. As much as the pain of splitting runs so deep, the fact that it was what we would consider a bloodless revolution is something quite incredible. This is, though, where Yarovam starts going downhill. And I'd like to think, like I told you, many people want to paint him as the worst king. In fact, the Tanakh gives us enough reason to think so. But you have somebody who seemingly starts off really caring about his brothers, really caring about the average citizen, really caring about the underdog, the orphan, the widow, the poor, the misrepresented, the underrepresented. And what does he get? He gets 10 out of 12 tribes. But like Haman, remember Haman? Haman gets the entire kingdom to bow to him except for the Jew. Which one? Mordechai. Lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh. Mordechai HaTzadik. So you have thousands of people bowing down, kissing his toes, except for Mordechai. One Jew, one little Jew. And what does it do to Haman? It drives him crazy. He comes home and tells his wife, he says, V'chol zeh einenu shaveh li. Nothing's worth it for me. You have to ask, you are not normal. You have literally the entire country bowing down to you. The king comes to consult with you. You're the highest honorary. This one Jew bothers you? How petty could you be? And you see this, unfortunately, a lot. People in positions of power, they have so much power, and yet the one person that doesn't listen to them, suddenly nothing else matters. You sometimes see this also with little children. And sometimes people never grow up. Their bodies grow up, but they stay little. Their whole day was good except for one little thing. They stubbed their toes, Starbucks burned their coffee, they fought with their spouse, fill in whatever the blank is. And you ask them, how's their day? Horrible, miserable. I hate everything. But 99% of your day was good. How is it that 1% makes everything not worth it? So here comes the tragedy, and I want to read to you. Let's look together into Pasuk Chafhei Chavav. So let's go there. So again, we're still in chapter Yud Bet. Okay, chapter 12. Let's look at Pasuk Chafhei. Chapter 25.
Verse 20.
Yarovam has a problem. He goes ahead and he builds he builds now a different palace, which makes sense because obviously if the kingdom split, he needs a different headquarters. ויבן ירובעם את שכם בהר אפרים, וישב בה, ויצא משם ויבן את פנואל. So first he builds up Har Ephraim, but eventually he moves his capital to Penuel. ויאמר ירובעם בליבו. And he says to himself in his heart, עתה תשוב הממלכה לבית דוד. At this point, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that the kingship will return to the house of David. Why? Look at Pasuk Chav Zayin. אם יעלה העם הזה לעשות זבחים בבית אדוני בירושלים. What's going to happen? We have holidays coming up. The Jewish people are going to go up to the Bet HaMikdash. They're going to start bringing the sacrifices. Where's the Bet HaMikdash? It's not in Shevet Ephraim. It's not in Shrem. It's in Yerushalayim. Yes, contrary to what other people think, Yerushalayim is our city. The old city is our city. Har HaBayit is where the Jewish people have their capital. The Jewish people are going to come there. V'shav lev ha'mazeh ladoneim. And it's very quickly going to happen that the Jewish people, they come back to Yerushalayim, to the Bet HaMikdash. They're going to see Rechavam. What are they going to do to me? Who's this imposter? Yeah, they're going to kill me. V'alguni v'shavu Rechavam melech Yehuda. They're going to go and they're going to return back to Rechavam. Now, hold your hand over here for a second. If you open back to our Sanhedrin 101 that we were on, the Gemara just elaborates for us, what was he so concerned about? Yeah, what's he so concerned about? So they'll go up to Yerushalayim and what's going to happen? So if I can, let me just read to you a second. It's going to be Sanhedrin. Let's look at 101b. So it's going to be Kuf Aleph Amud Bet. Let's look at in yours, if you're doing it on Safari, it's going to be Yudalid. If not, then like I said, I don't know how to tell you where. It starts with Amar Rav Nachman. Rabbi Nachman says I shall worry about. Okay, Amar Rav Nachman, Gasut haruach shaya bi'arovam tiradatom min haolam. The arrogance, the ga'ava of Yarovam is ultimately what drove him out of the world. We started with the story of Icarus. This is where Yarovam starts to fly too high. So far, he seemed like a good character. Listen to the following. Shenemar, like it says, and we just read, Vayomer Yarovam belibo. He says in his heart, Ata tashuv hamamlacha lebet David. Now, the kingdom's going to go back to Bet David. Why? What was he worried about? Amar, Gmirei da'im yeshiva ba'azara ela lemache Bet Yudah. I have a problem. We're going to start pilgrimaging back up to Yerushalayim. And there's a halacha that who's allowed to sit in the Bet HaMikdash? Only the king. But which king? Only the king from the Bet Yehuda, from the house of Yehuda. Kevan dechazu leil rachavam diativ. So what's going to happen? I'm going to come now with all my 10 tribes. We're going to pilgrim it up. And what are they going to do to me? I'm going to have to stand, right? Rechavam is going to be sitting because he's the king of Yehuda. He's allowed to sit in the Bet HaMikdash. Where am I going to be? I'm going to be standing on the side. I'm going to be standing in the back. And what's going to then happen? When they see that Rechavam sitting, they're going to say, Ha-malka v'ha-v'avda. It must be, he's the king and he's the servant, right? We once had a prince whose mother is actually the queen of a very large tribe in Africa.
15 million people.
Yeah, and he told us, he said, his mother sits, but his father doesn't, because he's not the king. His mother's the queen. She rules the country, at least her tribe, but the father's not. He's not the king, and therefore you don't get to just sit. And Yarovam says, I'm going to come, even if they stand me up in the front near the, right? Even if I'm going to be near the rabbi, but everyone's going to know I'm not the rabbi. I'm going to look like the assistant. I'm going to look like the vice president. Yarovam, you're the assistant of 10 of the tribes, you understand? He's coming with a puny little entourage of people. Doesn't matter. When they're going to see this, it's going to hurt my ego. And then the people are going to say, oh, who's he? He's just the servant. What do we need him for? Let's leave. That's his logic. So what does he do? He comes up with a plan. Look at Pasuk Chaf Chet, 28. So we're back in chapter 12, Pasuk 28. V'yiva'atz hamelech, he goes and again he consults. Now if you look into the Gemara, it's interesting. The consulting that he has, it says, he brought together a group of half good people, half wicked people. And he did seating, one and one and one and one. Why? He knew that he needs to plant some agents of his own in this group. But in order for the Jewish people to actually follow him, he needs a group of righteous people to sign off on it. And he turns to the people and he says, I'm your leader? And they all answer, yes, of course. He says, I'm your leader for everything? Yes. Will you follow me to any battles? Yes. Will you pledge allegiance to me? Yes. What's if I do outlandish things? Are you still going to back me? They all say yes. He says, what's if I did something as crazy as I put up idols? Would you still follow me? And the righteous people in the crowd said, no, of course not. And the wicked people whispered into there and said, he's just testing us. He wants to see how much allegiance you could play. Of course he's not going to do it. And they all said yes. So much so that even Achiyah Shiloni, the prophet who originally anointed him, signs off on this. Now you have to understand, Yarovam, he was not an idiot. He was not an Ama'aretz. The Gemara tells us that his Torah was stellar. He comes to present this to the Jewish people as following. He says, when Moshe Rabbeinu left the Jewish people in the desert and they thought that he wasn't coming back, what did Aaron do for them? He made an idol, right? Now, it wasn't the wrong thing. It was simply the wrong timing because Moshe Rabbeinu ultimately came back. He says, but now that our kingdom split, I'm not going to make one idol because that clearly didn't work out so well for the Jews in the desert. I want to do something that's going to remind you of the Keruvim. Remember the Keruvim? Right? If you go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, you have the beautiful two angels. He said, I'm going to recreate that for us because we don't have the Bet HaMikdash. So I'm going to put Beit all the way to the north of Israel, and then at the southern border of the 10 tribes, I'm going to put two different idols. It's not necessarily idol worship. It's going to mimic the Keruvim that they have in Yerushalayim. And the best part, it's going to save you on gas. Now he's not just a social leader, he's also an environmentalist. Why do you have to walk so hard? Why do you have to travel so far? I'm going to make the religion that much more accessible to the people. You're going to come from the north of Israel. You have to understand, today we complain when, I sat in traffic for 20 minutes. My father told me that when his grandfather used to go, so this was before Meron was actually a popular site, like the Burning Man Festival. It was when very few people actually would go up to the city of Meron. My great-grandfather used to go. How did he go? So he's coming from Jerusalem. He's going to the north of Israel. He would leave right after Pesach is over because it would take them almost a month and a half to get to the north. First, they would walk, and then they would get rides. There were Arabs along the way, the Bedouins that came with their donkeys and their wagons, and they would get hitches with them. Interestingly enough, my father would always tell me that when they would come to the gravesite of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Meron, both the Jews and the Arabs would stop together there to pray. But we're talking about a travel that would take him a month and a half to get there. He would spend a month there, and then it would take another month and a half to come back. And this is we're only talking about in the 1900s. You could imagine what it was like to travel here. So Yarovam pitches to them something fantastic. He says, don't worry. I'm going to set up, it's idols, but it's not idols. There's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. It's going to be in Dan, Ad Beersheva. You never have to go back to Yerushalayim. Now, the people are not so sad because anyway, they felt like the underdogs, right? We're talking already about the tribes who never felt that we were part of that aristocracy. We were anyway just the peasants. And now he's putting us on such a pedestal. They accept. They accept. He does something else. Yarovam says, I want to make sure that the Jewish people, they also don't get homesick. So instead of celebrating the Chagim in the right time, he takes Sukkot and he moves it just 1 month later. So instead of it being in the month of Tishrei, he moves it to the month of Cheshvan. Now, it might not seem like such a big deal to us. Okay, so what's the big deal? He moves it. But it's very simple. Imagine if you have a sister who's part of Shevet Yehuda, and now you're part of Shevet Dan. And you say, let's celebrate Pesach together. She says, hold on. While I'm eating my matzot, for lack of a better reference, you're still eating your Oznei Haman. You understand? Meaning, you're busy eating cookies and cakes while I'm keeping Pesach. For me, it's Tisha B'Av. For you, it's already Yom HaKippurim. And ultimately, what he does is he really destroys any chance of the two nations ever coming together. Because now we can't even agree on when the date of our same religion is, or of our same holiday. And unfortunately, he really breaks the Jewish people. If there was any hope that the nation could heal, at this point, we're talking one generation, two, we don't speak the same language. We don't celebrate on the same days. We don't go to the same schools. We don't have a central office. What really should have happened was, the kingdom split, so there could be two offices. Could there be two synagogues? Sure, there could be. I grew up in a world, you see, San Diego's a little different. I didn't realize how territorial everybody was. I didn't realize that every hill has a little king, and every king is a tyrant, and they own the plot of land that nobody gave them. I didn't know. Why? Because I grew up in a very big city. So the very, very big fish, they're busy suing each other in court. But the average people, every 3 houses is a synagogue. That's normal. That's normal. You can go pray Shacharit in one place, Musaf in another synagogue, Mincha somewhere else, Arvit in another place, and if you want the 3 meals in 3 different synagogues, you could do that too. Yeah? But what should have happened here is, so we split into 2. So what? We still have one central government. You see, the Beit HaMikdash is not just a religious entity. It's where our whole nationhood is. What should have happened was, Yarovam says, I have the 10 tribes. I am leading them from the political side, from the economic side, from the religious side. They're under my jurisdiction. But when it comes to Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, I'm going to put my pride on the side, and I'm going to come back so that we could be one nation. And unfortunately, time and time and time again, he doesn't have the ability to do that. I want to, if I can, Yarovam creates his own new holiday. And he's in the middle of bringing korbanot, right? Sacrifices. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends a Navi. Now, it doesn't tell us which Navi, but the Chachamim tell us it was Ido HaNavi. If I recall correctly, we recently read this Haftarah, and I don't remember when. You taught us here? Okay. A very tragic story about Ido. But if you can, let's look for a minute at Melachim Aleph. Okay, so we're in chapter 13, Pasuk Zayin. Again, chapter 13. Let's look at Pasuk Zayin. So Yarovam is busy celebrating his holiday. The Jewish people, we're talking about thousands of Jewish people are there. Again, chapter 13, the 7th Pasuk. Vayidaber HaMelech el ha'ish Elohim. Oh no, okay, let's go back a second, because I want to show you something interesting there. Look at Pasuk. Now I want to go back a minute. Okay, but go to the beginning of Pasuk Perek Yud Gimel. Go to the beginning of chapter Yud Gimel a minute. So the Navi comes, V'hinei ish Elohim ba miYehuda. He's coming from the tribe, from Shevet Yehuda, from the tribe of Yehuda, and he has a nivuah to bring to Yarovam. Yarovam is at the altar. Vayikra el hamezbeach b'dvar Adonai v'yomer mizbeach, mizbeach. Now the prophet doesn't even want to give him the dignity of speaking to him, so he's pretending to speak to the mizbeach, meaning Yarovam, you're not even worth my time. Ko amar Adonai, this is what Hashem said. Hine ben olad lebet David Yoshiyahu shmo. There's going to be a child born to the house of David. His name is Yoshiyahu. He will return the glory, and he will make sure to destroy you and your kingdom and any trace that ever existed, Yarovam, because you unfortunately have taken the Jewish people and led them astray in ways that are unimaginable. And he tells them, don't worry, if you want to know if this nivuah is going to be true, look at Pasuk Gimel. V'natan bayom ha'u mofet lemor zeh ha'mofet asher diber Adonai. Watch. Hineh ha'mizbeach nikra v'nishpach ha'deshen asher alav. You're going to see right now that the mizbeach is going to crack in half, and everything that you just brought as korbanot is going to start spilling out. V'yi kishmo ha'melech et dvar ish Elohim asher kara al ha'mizbeach bebetel. When Yarovam hears this, v'yishlach Yarovam et yado, he puts his hand out because he wants to attack him. What happens? His hands get jammed. His hand gets, it says it gets stiff like a piece of wood. He can't move it. So now here's the Navi telling him horrible things. Yarovam is trying to save face, and he can't. Now he's paralyzed. Look at Pasukei. V'hamizbeach nikra. And what the Navi said actually happens. The Mizbeach breaks, all the desha and all the korbanot start pouring out, and the king is helpless. Vayan hamelech. Look at Pasuk Vav, the 6th Pasuk. So the king says to the Ish Elohim, I'm begging you, please, pray to God. Vitbalel badi. Pray so that my hand should return back to its power, and I shouldn't make a mockery out of myself. Again, it's not pray to Hashem, I want to do Teshuvah, I want to be better. It's I have a tremendous ego, and I'm so worried about my image, and right now I'm making a fool out of myself. So I'm asking you, because clearly you're a true prophet, pray for me, return my strength. He does. The Navi prays, and Yarovam's hand goes back to normal. Now I wanted to just share this pasuk. It has nothing to, it has what to do with the shiur, but I think it's an important note. So here, the Navi came to tell Yarovam that not just is he and his whole family going to die, but King David's family is going to be the one who's going to come and destroy them. Yarovam wants to kill him. He has a failed attempt. What would you think is the normal departure of two such people? Friendly? No, of course not. They're arch enemies. But this is in the Middle East, because the Torah was not given in France and Germany and America, where we give each other silent treatment for the next 10 years, because that's how we fight. It doesn't work that way. Look at Pasuk Zayin. וידבר המלך אל איש האלוהים, it's a little 1:45, right? Amazing. וידבר המלך אל איש האלוהים, בוא איתי הביתה. The king turns to the prophet who just told him he's going to die. He says, why do you come to my house? וסעדה ואתנה לך מתת, come eat, drink, you'll rest your head a little bit. Again, if you come from a culture that is cold, you will never understand this pasuk. What do you mean? We just fought. So now we need at least 10 years to process this, and maybe therapy and intervention and some mediator, and you're toxic. I'm not telling you all those things are not true. Simply, the Jewish people are not from that culture. We fought, we threw some dishes, we yelled, we screamed, we got the anger out, and now it's time to keep moving. Now come back home. Now we're going to eat. Now we're going to drink. But the Navi tells him very smart. He says, no. Hashem told me that I shouldn't eat anything, drink anything. I have to go back home. Thank you for the offer. Oh, this is it, Elchanan. You want to come tell us the story? Quick.
I don't remember.
So this is the story that we heard a few weeks ago, which is the sad part is, Ido HaNavi is right. He's not allowed to eat or drink anything until he comes back home.
I cannot remember why I spoke about it.
I can't either. I thought it was in the Haftarah. So what happens? Ido is now on the way home. He tells the king, no, thank you. Yarovam.
This is Ido.
This is Ido. What happens? On the way home, who does he meet?
He meets another prophet, but a Baal prophet. So
Yes,
not a real prophet. And he tells him, I got a prophecy from Hashem that says you could come eat. And this man was well known for being a real prophet, but he wasn't. So he comes, he eats and drinks. Then on the way home, a lion comes and kills him. But as to show, the lion doesn't even eat him. The lion just kills him and leaves his body on the road.
Hashem should bless me with more children like Elchanan and Avinoam.
And Shiran Hodei.
And Shiran Hodei, of course. I have to be careful. Safta's on the line. All of them are the best. But that's precisely what happens. Unfortunately, Ido HaNavi, he doesn't listen to God. He doesn't listen to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And Hashem immediately tells me to listen. You will unfortunately not come to Kever Yisrael. You will not be buried with your ancestors. And on his way back to the land of Yehuda, he gets killed by a lion and his remains are just strewn on the road. Now at this point, I want to read to you one more Gemara, if we can. Yep, one more Gemara. Same Sanhedrin Kuf Aleph. I think it's actually Kuf Bet at this time. Let me see where I want. I think it's Kuf Bet. Let me, give me a second. If I don't see it, then I'm going to tell it to you. Okay. It's going to be in Kuf Bet. Yes, so 102, Amud Aleph. It's going to be the first of the two sides. And if you're looking at Sefaria, you're going to find it in Yud Zayin, 17. If not, it's going to start with Achar Hadavar Hazeh Lo Shav Yarovam Midarko Hara. After this. So here HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends Ido HaNavi. We know that there's a rule when it comes to prophecy. Any good prophecy doesn't come contingent on anything else. So when the Navi comes to tell the Jewish people good things, it will always happen. Bad prophecies are always contingent on what? Very good. If the person doesn't do Teshuvah, then the prophecy will be fulfilled. But if the person is willing, right, Yashuv, Vichalo, what's the word? Umishachata, Yashuv, I don't remember the pasuk. Yeah, the bad nevuah always comes with a contingency, meaning it doesn't have to happen. It's why the Navi comes to begin with. Come do Teshuvah. We saw last week with David HaMelech, where Natan HaNavi comes and he says, you're going to die. And the first thing David HaMelech utters, Chatati. And immediately Natan HaNavi says, okay, Hashem accepts, and therefore you will not die. Right? That's the purpose of the Nevuah. I want to share with you the backside of Ken. Yeah. Of what's the conversation? Ido HaNavi comes, he tells him to do Teshuvah. And at this point, Yarovam is suffering from a horrible case of hubris. He flew too high. His wings are melting, the feathers are falling off, and he is going to nosedive down to the bottom, so hard to the bottom that every single time we say, Zechet Tzadik Leveracha V'Shem Reshaim Yirkav, right? This is a pasuk from Mishlei. The Chachamim tell us who was, Shlomo, right, wrote it, so it has to be before. But who do we say V'Shem Reshaim? May the name of this bad person just rot and be, and we're talking about Yarovam, who was the quintet. We have so many, unfortunately, horrible things to say about him because the whole first half gets lost with the whole second half of his inability to step down from his ego. His inability to say, I'm suffering right now from an unchecked arrogance. I need to start listening. I need to open my ears. I need to humble my heart. So much so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes, and I want to read to you. So Ido comes to him. What's the conversation? He doesn't come back. My achal, what is the word achal? After what? Right? So the Navi says after what? Amar Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba says the following. Achar shetafso HaKadosh Baruch Hu liYarovam. Hashem comes and he grabs onto Yarovam. And what does he say to him? He says, come back. V'amar lo chazor becha. Come do teshuvah. You were once the savior of the Jewish people. You were once the light of the nation. You were the one who was able to critique the king because you were on a straight and good path. Come back. What does he say? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, V'ani v'ata uben Yishai netayel began Eden. Me, you, and the son of Yishai, David HaMelech, we're all going to walk in the Garden of Eden. Now I have to tell you, this is obviously a midrash that has to be unpacked, which is who's walking where, when. But Hashem is bringing him an offer. It would seem you can't refuse. Come back. I'm going to erase everything you've done up until now. Come back. You, me, and David HaMelech, a dream team, are going to take a walk in Gan Eden together. What is Yarovam's question? Mi barosh. Who's going to go first? Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Ben Yishai barosh. David HaMelech is going to go first. What does he say? Ihachi lo benai. If that's the case, I'm not interested. Are you crazy? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is offering you a free pass. Come back. I am willing to scratch everything. Start again. So much so, I will bring you up to the level of David HaMelech. It's going to be the three of us. And what does Yarovam ask? Who's going to be first? Only somebody who is really suffering from a tremendous ego problem could even have such a question. And ultimately, you find the tragedy, which I'm going to tell you. Yarovam, he loses his child in his lifetime. the kingship fails. We have afterwards his descendants just continue doing the bad in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu until Yoshiyahu, right, from the Melech Yehuda comes and destroys any remnants of Yarovam. And who suffers the most? The people. The people. Because here was a leader who told them, I have your back. I care about you. I'm here for you. And seemingly, initially, he did. He stood up for them. He made sure that those people who didn't have voices could be heard. And at a certain point in his career, he took a wrong turn. And with Yarovam, I think it's a little clearer. I think with individuals, I'm talking about us, very often we find ourselves 5, 10, 20 years and we scratch our heads, how did I get here? And usually it's not one major life event that took us to the other side of the world. It's usually small little steps along the road of things that we let slide because we didn't keep ourselves in check, that 10, 20 years later are so much harder to fix. Take something as simple as weight. You can lose a pound. Everybody can lose a pound. You can lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 100 pounds, right? Now, I'm not hating on anybody, okay? But simply, when something is so small, it's easy for us to tackle. You have one pile of laundry, you can fold it. 2 piles of laundry, a whole house of laundry. At a certain point, things become unmanageable. And I think if we can learn, I have 3 lessons I want, if I can end with. We find that in Mishlei, it's a book that we're going to learn together, Bezat Hashem. I'm looking at you, Rabbi. I know that you bought a whole supply of books. Together. Shlomo HaMelech says, To'avat Adonai kol gvalev. It's something disgusting. This arrogance that a person has, Hashem finds absolutely disgusting. We know that the pasuk says, En ani v'hu yicholim lador b'makom echad. Hashem says, me and the Baal Gava, we can't live in the same place. The person whose ego is so great that it blinds them from seeing anything else, anybody else. We can't live in the same world. And I want to, if I can, 3 things. I think the first is, sometimes we lead our life in a way that we would never responsibly lead a business. What do I mean? Hannah, you ran a business with your mom? Yeah. You took inventory of the things you have? How many times? Every day. Every single day. Why?
You can't run out of supplies.
Because if you're making tortillas and you don't have flour, you're not making tortillas. You understand? Yeah. If you sell clothing, but you don't have the clothing, you don't sell clothing anymore. Any normal business model tells you every single day. At the end of the day, you close the store, you take inventory. What do I have left? What do I need more of? What's broken? What's fixed? What's working? You then have weekly, right, which are a little bit bigger. What were the expenses? What did we bring in? What did we spend? Monthly. Checks and balances. Dalia, who does the finances in your house? Avi, yeah? Avi balances the books? It's good. If you ever have, there's some people who are not so good at balancing finances. Avi, I trust, right? But some people, they never check their bank account. They swipe, and then they wonder, wow, how do I have $100,000 of debt? It's very simple. It would have been painful if on day one you checked and you had a deficit of $2. But that you could have paid off. But 10 months down the line, how are you going to pay off $100,000 debt? It's irresponsible. And sometimes we lead our life in a very irresponsible fashion. Where instead of saying, you know what, today, when I wake up in the morning, I have to do a little cheshbon hanefesh. I have to sit 5 minutes in the morning. What do I want my day to look like? What are my goals? What do I need? And then to check in at the end of the day. Okay, so did I accomplish them? What did I yes do? What did I not do? Because if we don't check in the little places, we end up like Yarovam. We end up so far off the track that there's really no way coming back. How am I supposed to come back of 40 years of doing something? Right? You see this sometimes with kids. It's easy to break a habit when you're 2 because you're just learning your habits. You ever try breaking a habit when you're 20 or 30 or 40? It's almost impossible. It doesn't mean you can't, but it's almost impossible because things get set in stone. And I'm asking us three things. One, that's it, humility. It says, Heve shefal ruach. A person needs to constantly live with the humility, not that I'm a nobody, but that if I fly too high, I will burn myself to death. If not for anybody, do it for a selfish reason. If I want to stay a healthy, good human being, I must be humble. There's a creator. There are rules. There are people who are smarter and better who've done this before. I don't need to be blazing the trails all the time on my own by myself and making the same mistake that thousands before us made. Humility. 2, responsibility. You messed up. Take responsibility. We all make mistakes. The ability to say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, I will try better, is what helps us stay in check. The third and last thing, it's a constant cheshbon nefesh. It says, Shuv yom echad lefnei mitatcha. Person has to do teshuvah one day. When? Before you die. Sar Chachamim asked, okay, but who here knows when they're going to die? The answer is nobody knows when. Oh, so when should you do teshuvah? Kol yamecha yu b'teshuvah. Every single day we have to do teshuvah. The root of the word teshuvah does not mean pound your chest. It doesn't mean repentance. It doesn't mean make a large donation to the synagogue. And it doesn't mean go talk to your friends about how bad you are. Teshuvah means to return. There's a great song. The lines are return to your soul. Return to the land of your soul. Doing teshuvah every single day, every single minute. It's a root recalculation, right? We're recalibrating. Every single day a person has to say, you know what? I want to have the humility to be able to say, I'm not the greatest. I'm not the best. I could mess up. I could make mistakes. And therefore, I'm not afraid to sit down and to look at the things I've done today and try tomorrow better and to figure out what worked and what didn't work. And if for 20 years I'm trying the same thing and it didn't work, so chances are I might need a better plan. I might need to do something different. But to be unafraid to say, I never want my ego, chas v'shalom, to get in my way. Because you can have a character who starts off like a rock star, like Yarovam, and unfortunately ends up being one of the harshest leaders that the Jewish people suffer from. And I'm asking all of us, now is a good month. It's a good month to start because we all have good qualities. In the end of the day, nobody is 100% bad. Neither is anybody 100% good. En sadik ba'ir asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yechata. There is no righteous person who doesn't sin. So whether you're the most righteous person or you think you're the most evil person, I'm telling you, you're neither. You're somewhere in between. And as somewhere in between, I'm asking us to have the humility to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, help me. Ozreini el chai. And I'm blessing us all, God willing, but we should be able to have the humility to listen. To be able to listen and to receive so that we can never ever fall into the pit of Icarus and his fellows who drowned in the sea of feathers and broken wax. On that note, I will wish you all a Laila Tov.